So I'm here to talk to you today about kind of NDC, where are we now? And I think if this doesn't wear off the morning coffee, then I don't really know what will. It's a complex topic. So I've just got 2 or 3 slides that I'll take you through for over the next 15, 20 minutes. We'll cover what is NDC, just to make sure we're all starting from the kind of same base position and foundational knowledge. What is the FCM approach to the NDC kind of challenge and opportunity that it presents? And then what are we doing right now globally? And then Joe will help me try and coax out any questions that we've got among the audience today. There we go. So I'm not going to read this word for word. This is kind of my own 2-sentence definition, but I'm going to kind of pick out some of the 4 key points really that I think are really important to make sure everyone understands about what NDC is and what it is doing. So firstly, the important kind of thing really foundationally, what is NDC? It is a new technical standard of communication in the industry. And it's designed to allow the airlines to communicate between all of the different parties in their travel ecosystem and distribution chain. As it is a new technical standard and an industry standard based on more modern technology, it essentially lowers the barriers to entry for new technology providers, new travel technology providers in the industry to basically support and offer increased competition in that space. And then finally, that increased competition in the travel technology provider space has the effect of lowering an airline's cost of distribution and, importantly, accelerating the rate of innovation and change that ultimately will benefit the consumer. So that's the kind of utopian theory of what NDC is. It all sounds extremely simple, but there's a huge amount of complexity that exists around the edges. And that's kind of what we're trying to navigate today and over the next kind of coming years as a TMC. So what is the FCM approach? There are kind of 3 key pillars that I think are really important to pick out in terms of what we're doing to facilitate the NDC change and how we're approaching that kind of huge undertaking. Firstly, from a content completeness perspective, right now, the NDC change, I suppose, despite the many promises in the industry over the last kind of decade since NDC came about as a concept, we really are still at a very, very early transformational phase of NDC, where it really is at the moment about making sure we can offer our customers a full range of content. So it's all about content completeness, both in your online booking tools and offline via an FCM consultant, and ultimately being able to provide a one-stop shop for our customers in terms of content. Content is not enough. It's a kind of key mantra I live by when doing this NDC project and have lived by over the last couple of years. As a business and as a TMC, it is as much our job to protect our customers from poor NDC solutions as it is to provide all of the content that's available. And that's a really important point, because I think often we see airlines come out with content that is probably available before the airline is fully functionally ready to be able to support it, particularly from a corporate travel perspective. And that's something that I think when you distill it down, you can definitely understand. You know, if an airline's NDC does not have NDC unique content, then no one will use it. No one will provide the feedback that will allow that airline to continually develop and build on that functionality. But importantly, it's our job to hold the airlines to account in terms of the functionality they deliver and educate them ultimately on the needs of the corporate traveller, which is obviously a kind of traveller that an airline would not usually service directly. And then thirdly, kind of the pillar kind of focused on essentially how we have decided to go about this change and how we have connected. Typically, the more knowledgeable among you in terms of NDC will know that there are 2 key ways to connect to an airline's NDC. First is to connect directly, and the second is to connect via an established technology provider or aggregator. We've kind of gone with a mixed approach, and we've tried to find the best of both worlds in that perspective. We are, as a business, a GDS-first approach when it comes to NDC. We work very closely with Amadeus in our Amadeus-powered markets, very closely with Sabre in our Sabre-powered markets, and as Marcus mentioned earlier, we have recently increased our investment in a travel technology provider called TP Connects, based over in Dubai. And that is a huge step, I think, for FCM in taking control of more of that end-to-end customer technology stack. And it's kind of certainly something that I see helps FCM stand out. It's a unique approach where we've essentially said we want the benefits of a direct connect. We want all of the control that brings in terms of being able to deliver what we want and when we want it. But at the same time, we're using the scale of an established travel technology provider to be able to accelerate that change and that rate of change. And where we are now, we've kind of used the lull of travel over the last 2 years and used that pandemic period to really make sure that we have got all the foundations in place and that we've kept educating the airlines on what is needed, what changes are needed, what further development is needed in the industry and in their own NDC content. And we've now kind of been using the kind of gradual increase in travel demand over the last couple of months to scale our pilots naturally and really start to give more feedback to the airlines on what can change and how we can take this change to the next level. Finally, so yeah, just to kind of go around the regions in terms of what we're doing right now in terms of that NDC space. It's kind of not just a Europe project, although the European airlines typically have been the most aggressive and forthcoming in the NDC space, particularly in terms of content. But firstly, in the Americas, we've been working very closely with Air Canada to introduce content both offline and in the Concur online booking tool in the second quarter this year. We have very recently started a pilot with our partners who are in the room today, United, in the US. It's a very early days pilot that we started with Sabre literally as of last week that we'll hope to kind of facilitate and then roll out further over the coming months. And then we'll kind of keep rolling that out further and further into more and more FCM markets. And ultimately, the focus for us to start with is an airline's home market, so a home carrier in a home market, making sure that we can really broaden that range of content where it's needed most. From an EMEA perspective, I suppose where I kind of do most of my working on the NDC space, it's certainly a region where we've been more established in the NDC space. We've obviously had to work a lot more closely with the likes of British Airways and the Lufthansa Group, who've been very active over the last couple of years in bringing out NDC content. We have now got BA ready offline in the UK, Ireland, Germany, Switzerland, Nordics, and South Africa. We've got Concur and Cytric that we're working very closely with, and we've kind of been almost there for some months now, and it will kind of continue to be almost there probably for the next kind of 6 weeks or so before we get the BA NDC content live in those markets. We've then got the Lufthansa Group, really importantly, been online since November 2020 in Germany, and we've continued to roll that out in a couple of other markets as well, and that was in response to Lufthansa's continuous pricing that they launched at that point towards the end of 2020. Really making sure that we can offer that content in their home market has been really key. And then the focus right now in EMEA and actually in other markets as well is Singapore Airlines and Air France-KLM, who again have been airlines that have been quite forthcoming in their approach to NDC and in getting unique NDC content to the market. And that's something that should go live within the next kind of 6 to 8 weeks. And then finally, in Asia Pacific, again, working with Singapore Airlines, particularly on the Singapore point of sale, and then rolling out further in the second quarter. And then also, you know, Australia, a huge market for us globally, and Qantas have probably, in my mind, been the most progressive in terms of the NDC content that they've been willing to offer, not just cheaper price points, and not just the lowest fares available in their NDC channel, but they've really kind of taken it a notch further and really tried to make it very bespoke to the customer, giving discounts based on frequent flyer, tier status, and more interesting things like that have been intriguing to work with, but obviously present their own challenges in how we communicate that to customers. and make sure that travel managers have ultimate say on who gets those discounts.
I suppose I'm going to have to do the first question, which I've said to Dan before, but we talked about this 4 years ago. Lily, you're shaking already. Why is it so slow?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I suppose there's a few different reasons. I think firstly, the scale of the change, I think, has ultimately been massively underestimated, not just from an airline perspective, but I think throughout the whole industry. I think ultimately NDC is trying to transform and replicate technology that's been in existence and in use in the industry for the last 25 to 30 years. So yeah, I think to kind of think we would achieve that as an industry in the space of a few years was probably short-sighted. I also think there's a huge number of third parties that are involved. I suppose when you look at the various airlines, the technology providers, the online booking tools that need to line up as well and all make sure that we can get that full end-to-end online and offline approach. And that's been another major point that's made things go a bit more slowly. But yeah, I think ultimately the pandemic has also hampered that over the last 2 years in the sense that while airlines still see NDC as a massive priority going forward, they have just not been, and understandably, they've just not been able to provide the same level of investment to further their NDC channels over the last 2 years as they were previously. And I think that's probably set us back a little bit of time as well.
Great. Does anyone have questions for Dan? And just to give you a bit of feedback on Dan actually joined us from British Airways. So he knows it from both sides of the coin. So does anyone have questions or a question for Dan specifically?
Thank you. So for travel managers, we started to look into NDC with what Lufthansa did back in some years ago. I think we were not ready at all. But my question is, for travel managers, the price amongst well-being and sustainability might be the driver. But we might choose even the OBT, okay, because of this. Yeah. So we would like to know, or I would like to know if Concur, Cytric, how is dealing with this. Because for the moment I can see some NDC content through Travel Fusion, you know, but I see some content for cheaper fares, and then I need to go to the offering of GDS for taking more flexible options. So I would like to see how do you envisage the future with different OBTs. And also the form of payments, because the form of payments, even if we do it through former GDS or Amadeus NDCX, we need to instant ticket it, and we cannot keep on hold while we have maybe an approval. So I would like to know a little bit of that.
Yeah, but both your questions. So yeah, I mean, on the online booking tool side, I think if you take Cytric and Concur in particular to start with, I think Concur have said to us many times in recent past that they are very focused on replatforming. So they're kind of, NDC is a second phase to their own replatform. And I suppose that has delayed kind of their NDC progress really over the last kind of couple of years. And they, I think, anticipate, based on our recent conversations with them, that replatform will take the rest of this year. And we will likely not see any further NDC content progress from them until 2023. I think that's probably fair to say. That will be the year where we start to see a bit more from them in terms of content. Then, from a Cytric perspective, I think we'll probably see something a little bit earlier. Obviously, Cytric, owned by Amadeus, will start to use the Amadeus NDC web services in the very near future, and we should be able to start consuming that kind of from the summer. So that's something that will be a bit quicker, probably maybe 6 to 9 months quicker. In terms of the instant ticket that we've kind of generally had with what has been available via the OBTs recently, that is ultimately because Concur and Cytric have been consuming all their NDC content in the short term via Travel Fusion, which is the same channel that they have traditionally got all their low-cost carrier content. And because traditionally that flow with low-cost carriers has always been instant ticket, they've just not changed that when they've implemented NDC. But in terms of the airlines delivering their NDC functionality, instant ticket is not a stipulation that the airlines are saying is essential. So as soon as the OBTs have their longer term propositions in place, there will be no more kind of instant ticket restrictions that we'll see. And then obviously, I mean, one of the things we already touched on was TP Connects and the investment we've made there. And I think what that will do, particularly for our own online booking technology going forward, but as well as potentially some of the third-party tech as well, will hopefully see that kind of enable us to standardize more of that content and make it available a bit more quickly over the next couple of years. So yeah, that's something as well that we see as a big kind of long-term game changer for us in terms of how we can accelerate that change.
I think, as Dan said, it's obviously a mixture between so many different technologies. Then you've got the commercial impact on all sides of doing it. So I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the airlines had any idea when they started quite how complex it would be to deliver it to especially corporate customers.
And I think really, moving from the airline side to the FCM side, I think probably the number one thing that I kind of noticed as a stark difference was that when you're at an airline kind of controls the full end-to-end customer experience when it comes to airline.com. And when that has essentially meant when they've been building their NDC channels, they have had that in mind. Quite simple point-to-point traffic traditionally, some quite basic change functionality, but ultimately there's you think at an airline, who knows how to sell my airline product better than me? And I think over the last couple of years, I think we have answered that quite emphatically, really, especially when it comes to corporate travel. So that's something that really has taken a while as well.